so we just continued on. And I am on lesson number 38 in the book of Matthew, right? I'm already keeping count. 38. So and we've made it to chapter 10. And there's a lot of chapters, so this is going to go on for like a decade. It'll be a long time. But I had heard John MacArthur preach from the book of Job for like 35 years or something like that. And I'm thinking, wow, the book of Job. That's if you've ever read that, that would be a tough one to preach for 35 years. But anyway, Matthew's been good. I've enjoyed it. And I don't know what our protocol is in here. I know we've got a prayer thing. Do we do a lesson first and then prayer request, or is really nice? I have the freedom to do whatever. Well, let's go ahead and do the lesson, and then we'll finish up. And then there's a business meeting tonight. Yes, Buster. Is that why you were here copying stuff? Business meeting. So anyway, so in order not to bore Ryan too much, because he's been listening to me on Wednesday nights, I'm going to pick up where we have left, or I'm going to continue from where we have been going in the young adults, which is Matthew chapter 8, if you want to be there. That's where we're going to be at. But I don't know if sometimes I consider myself a little bit morbid, a little bit. I would envision different ways that I thought there was a possibility of dying. And I don't know if you guys ever did that. When I was a teenager, I honestly didn't think I was going to make it past 16. And I always thought I was going to die in a car wreck. And so far, I haven't died in a car wreck. But I was quite an aggressive driver. And for some reason, I just always thought that's how I was going to go. Now, I don't know, but you hear of diseases and different things, people in church that get sick or whatever, and you think, man, I wonder if that's how I'm going to go. Am I the only one that never does this? Oh, I am. Today's one of those things, or the lesson for today is about one of those things. And Jesus, in Matthew chapter 8, just to kind of give you a rundown on the way the book of Matthew is set up. At the beginning, of course, there's this lineage. Matthew is all about establishing the credentials of Jesus being Messiah. That's the point of the whole book. And so he does this. He quotes more Old Testament than any of the other Gospels, and he shows how Jesus fulfilled all of these prophecies. So that's one way. Another way he confirms the deity of Christ is through the lineage, because we know that Jesus was going to be born from the line of David, and so he gives us this lengthy lineage. So if you're starting a new Bible reading, and you're in Matthew, that first chapter kind of wipes you out, because it's all these people who begat all these other people. I don't know who these people are. What does it matter? Well, it does matter. Matthew went to put it in there, and the point of it is to add credibility to Jesus being Messiah. Well, chapters 2 and 3 come along about Jesus' birth and the miraculous things that happen there. And then in chapter 4, we see John the Baptist, the forerunner of Christ, and it talks about him and baptizing Jesus. And through the middle of chapter 4, we have Jesus being tempted. And then right at the very end of chapter 4, in fact, let's read that. Matthew chapter 4. We see, actually, I think it's the last couple verses. It says in verse 23, Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sicknesses and all kinds of disease among among the people. Then his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics, and paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. So here at the end of chapter 4, we see Jesus is starting this ministry of healing people. And it's significant. Right after this verse in chapter 5, it's kind of like Matthew does this break. Jesus is starting this healing ministry, but then chapter 5 he stops, and in chapters 5, 6, and 7, we have the Sermon on the Mount, okay, which is significant. You guys remember the blessed are the peacemaker, blessed are the, those low in spirit, all of those blessed be, and then he goes on through chapter 6 and 7. On this Sermon on the Mount, on the north side of the Sea of Galilee, so he's standing there preaching and teaching to multitudes of people, thousands and thousands of people. Okay? And just prior to that, he's started this healing process. So things are really kind of ramping up and rolling along. But one of the things in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus was trying to get straight was he was trying to teach the people that the religious things they'd been taught by the religious leaders were all wrong. They were wrong. And they were being led astray by these false religious teachers. And so he was trying to set all of that straight. So he was pretty harsh on not pretty harsh, he was very harsh on the Pharisees and those the religious leaders that were listening to him and that were within this multitude. So this lands us in chapter 8, which is what we're going to pick up today. But if you can kind of think of the flow of this, is in chapter 4, he starts this healing thing, then he does the Sermon on the Mount. Chapter 8 is a continuation of this healing ministry. Okay, so through chapter 8 and 9, I believe, we see these, there's 9 miracles that that Matthew records Jesus doing. Okay, now these are just 9 miracles. Jesus did countless miracles, countless numbers of healings. In fact, in one part of the Bible it says that Jesus healed everybody. Anyone that came to him, they were healed. So it was just one after another. Some people he healed, he didn't even see them. He healed them from afar. We'll see about that one in a couple weeks. But Matthew has decided to pull 9 of these out. And the first one that we're going to come to is a person that is healed from the disease of leprosy. Now this is one of those morbid things. I wonder, what would it be like to die from the disease of leprosy? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, the miracles were God's way of attesting to the deity of Christ. He healed. Well, this first set that we're going to see has to do with the physical body. Okay, in chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, we have the healing of the leper. Right after that, we have the healing of a man with paralysis, and then we have, healing of a woman with a fever. So, in fact, in John chapter 10, verse 25, it says, Jesus is talking. He says, "You deny me. You deny the things that I tell you, but you can't deny my works." Okay? You can deny when somebody says, "Hey, I'm a powerful preacher, and you need to listen to me because I'm so great," or whatever. And you can hear that and go, "Well, no," But if they can do miracles that only God can do, then that's different, isn't it? I mean, if somebody is raising somebody from the dead, that warrants your attention. Agreed? This is where you're supposed to talk back to me. So this is what Jesus was saying here in John chapter 10. You know, how can you deny my works? So Matthew inserts this in a very strategic place because since he had just delivered the Sermon on the Mount, the people that were listening were no doubt curious about why, who gave this guy authority to say these things. Because he was really disrupting the status quo of religion of the day. And so the first century Jew would have listened to that Sermon on the Mount, and they would have gone, you know, where's this guy from? Who is he? Who gives him the authority to speak to us like this? So enter chapter 8. This is who he is. It is a man who can do God things. Okay, so therefore he is deity. He has the authority to do it based on his works, not just his words. Okay, so anyway, let's look at these. We've got leprosy, palsy, and fever. Now, life is more than physical, but this passage shows us that Jesus is very concerned even about our physical well-being. We'll see later on that Jesus deals primarily with spiritual issues, but for right now, these first three miracles have to do with the physical body. Also, note that Jesus, in these physical miracles, is responding to appeals. The people who are being healed actually came and asked Jesus for help. Okay, and another thing to kind of make note of as we look through this is that according to Jewish culture, all three of these are the lowest life forms on the planet. Okay, a leprous person who couldn't be involved in worship. You couldn't touch them. They weren't allowed to be around you. The paralytic man is a Gentile, and the person who has a fever is what? A woman. Okay, so according to Jewish customs and culture, that was the three lowest life forms that there were. And so Matthew records Jesus doing these for a point. Okay, and the point is to establish his authority, but also showing compassion to the outcasts of society, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and read Matthew chapter 8, and starting at verse 1. It says, "When he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him." Why were the multitudes following him? The what? The miracles. Yeah, they were there for the show. Okay, Jesus was doing some wild, crazy things. He had crazy words to say, and it was interesting. So thousands and thousands of people followed him. It says, "And behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, 'Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean.' Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, 'I am willing, be cleansed.' Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, 'See that you tell no one, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them.'" Okay, so Jesus just came down from the mountain where he was preaching, and this great multitude of people are following him. And this leper approaches. Now this is really interesting language here because lepers don't approach. Lepers go the other way. When crowds are here, lepers go there, away, okay, lest they be stoned or whatever, because they weren't allowed in society. And but this says that this leper approached, or he came, which is really interesting. So the word leprosy means scaly. It's a very visible disease. Really, your skin is scaly. There's typically a few hundred cases of leprosy in the United States each year. Ironically, they're mostly all out in California. Today it's called Hansen's disease. Same thing as leprosy. It appears that at this time of the writing of Matthew, that leprosy had come from Egypt, and the children of Israel had carried it with them into the Promised Land. But because of the horror of the disease, God designated certain laws to deal with this and other plagues to protect the Hebrews. In fact, in Leviticus, there are 2 entire chapters devoted just to the disease of leprosy. And we're going to look at those a little bit. It's in Leviticus 13 and 14. Actually, we'll go ahead and turn there to Leviticus 13, verse 1. Leviticus 13, verse 1. It says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore, then he shall be brought to Aaron, the priest, or to one of his sons, the priests. Then the priest shall examine the sore of the skin on the skin of the body, and if the hair on the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous sore. Then the priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean. But if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore 7 days, and the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and it goes on and on and on, all through chapter 13. Okay, how to identify somebody that has leprosy. In fact, down in verse 45, if the priest deemed a person was unclean, that they had leprosy, it says, in verse 45, it says, "Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn and his head bare, and he shall cover his mustache," assuming it's a guy, I guess, "and cry, Unclean, unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean all the days he has the sore, he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp." Okay, so this was a horrible disease. They were isolated. If they weren't allowed to be within any closer than 6 feet to somebody. Imagine doing life like that. If the wind is blowing, they had to stay 150 feet away from other people if the wind's blowing. Isn't that something? Besides the visible scaly skin, the disease attacks the nervous system and causes limbs to become dead. No feeling. Okay, so your limbs didn't literally fall off, but because you because you couldn't feel your limbs, you may injure yourself, or drag a limb or something, and you can't feel the pain, and so it would possibly fall off, because of that. I'll share with you. You guys can laugh along with me. Karen's dad had I guess from his back injury or something like that, but he had no feeling in his toes, and so he was chainsawing, and he chainsawed his big toe off, and he didn't know it because he couldn't feel it. Yeah, that was hilarious. It also affected bone marrow and causes the person to shrivel. So your bones just kind of start pulling in, and as the bones recede, it draws up the skin around your fingers and toes to make them appear like claws. Isn't that amazing? Also, the wounds continuously ooze. Usually attacks the eyes. Most lepers at a certain point become blind. The rotting flesh emits a very unpleasant odor. Oddly, though, this is not a very painful disease. I guess mostly because your nerves are dead and you can't feel the stuff. But it attacks the larynx and causes the voice to be hoarse and grating. So you can see it, you can feel it, you can smell it, you can hear it. I mean, it's a terrible disease. But not only was the human body revolting, but the person diagnosed with leprosy was classified as unclean and could no longer participate in religious ceremonies. Okay, so if you have a person that was devout, they loved God, but they got this disease and they were out. That'd be hard. The whole package of leprosy is a vivid illustration of sin. Okay, sin defiles the whole body. It's ugly. It's incurable. Sin is contaminating, and it separates us. Right? There was one rabbi that was quoted as saying, "When I see lepers, I throw stones at them, lest they come near me." Be a bad way to live, wouldn't it? I mean, even the very people who are supposed to have compassion on you and be caring are throwing rocks at you so you don't come near them. So this leper approaches Jesus. In verse 2, we read in Matthew. I guess flip back over there. It says, "Behold, a leper came." Now that word "behold," or some of your Bibles may say "lo," that's a word like saying, "You won't believe this. This is wild." Okay, behold, listen to this. What happened? This guy didn't sneak up on the crowd. He came boldly right up through the crowd. He approached. He came straight up. Can you imagine the crowd's response to that? I mean, here's a guy that's supposed to be walking around yelling, "Unclean, unclean," and he just, there are multitudes of people there, and he just boldly walks right up through the middle. He had no social etiquette, did he? He probably didn't care. I mean, if you knew somebody had the ability to heal you from something like this, would you care what other people thought? No inhibitions at all. So he came boldly with no shame. He was desperate. But he also came with reverence. Look at that. It says, leper came and worshipped him. Okay, that word worship means that he falls prostrate before him. And then he says, "Lord." So he was recognizing Jesus with reverence. And then we see him coming with humility. It says, "If you are willing." He didn't demand. He didn't speak as though to command Jesus to act. Okay, he was humble. And then lastly, he came with faith. He said, I know you can if you are willing." So what a good heart this guy had. A faithful heart. So what did Jesus do? Dun, dun, dun. He healed him, right? How did he do it? Very important how he did it. Touched him. Here's a man that maybe had not been touched for years. And Jesus chooses to reach out his hand and touch him to heal him. The next one that we're going to read about, he heals him from afar. He doesn't even see the person that he's healing. But this one, he touches him. What a beautiful statement Jesus makes to this man. So Jesus could have healed him by any means, from any distance, but he chose touch. And immediately he was healed. And when we touch defilement, what happens? We get defiled, don't we? When Jesus touches defilement, the defiled get healed. That's just he was instantly made whole. I think that part of what eternity is going to look like in heaven is hearing the stories like this, hearing the leprous man and his experience of being healed by Jesus. Wouldn't that be an amazing story to just sit back and listen? We always wonder, well, it'll be stories like this that we hear, and we go from one to another to listen to how God worked in people's lives. I think it'll be amazing. So let's finish. Verse 4, it says, "And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go your way, show yourself to the priests, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them." Jesus does this pretty often. He tells people not to tell. And that always kind of struck me as a little bit odd. If Jesus was, if it was the right time, why not get these people talking about you, promotion? And, but I read quite a few commentaries as to why Jesus may have done this. And the one that seemed the most logical to me was the process of being deemed clean by the priest. Okay, we touched on it a little bit with Andrew. In fact, if you want to, let's flip back to Leviticus chapter 14. We'll read a passage about it. But there's this lengthy process of being deemed clean when you've been leprous. When you were a leper and now you're no longer one, there's a process that God had set up through Moses and the Mosaic law. And let's read that. Leviticus chapter 14 and about the first 20 verses. So it's really lengthy, but it's very interesting. So it says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the leprosy is healed in the leper, then the priest shall command to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 living and clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it, the cedar wood and the scarlet, and the hyssop, and dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times." You follow this, Danny? You paying attention? He sprinkles it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose in the open field. He who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and wash himself in water, that he may be clean. After that he shall come into the camp, and shall stay outside his tent for 7 days. But on the 7th day he shall shave all the hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows. All his hair he shall shave off. He shall wash his clothes and wash his body in water, and he shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish. It gets a little weirder if you're not reading ahead. So 1 ewe lamb of the first year without blemish, 3/10 of an how do you say that? Ephah. It's a measurement. A fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. Then the priest who makes him clean shall present the man who is to be made clean, and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And the priest shall take 1 male lamb and offer it as a trespass offering, and the log of oil, and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the burnt offering, in a holy place. For as the sin offering is the priest's, so the trespass offering. It is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it on the tip of the right ear of him who's to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palm of his left hand. And then the priest shall dip his right finger into the oil that is in his left hand, and shall sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord, and the rest of the oil in his hand the priest shall put some on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and the big toe again. And so the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. And the priest shall offer. Okay, it goes on. When we get to verse 21, it says, now, if the leprous man is poor, then we do this. It goes on with a whole other set of stuff. But the reason I want to read that to you is not to bore you with Levitical laws, but to make a point that there was this was a picture of sin. Okay, the Old Testament has a lot of pictures, types, and shadows of what we are living in the New Testament covenant. Okay, and this is a picture of sin and the separation of sin that we experience with God. So Jesus didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. So anyway, what did this guy do? Any idea? Jesus said, don't go tell, and what did he do? He told. The book of Mark tells us he got so excited, he ran around telling everybody. Okay, so the theory that I have, the best theory that I read as to why Jesus told him not to tell anybody, is that if this guy would have gone down to Jerusalem, started this process without telling anybody what happened, the religious leaders would have gone through what we just read. There would have been a 7-8 day process. They would have deemed him clean, and at that point, this leprous man could have said, "You want to know who healed me?" And they would have been stuck. They would have been hung by their own documentation that this guy was cleansed. Okay, but he didn't do it. Instead, he ran around and shot off his mouth. But anyway, you know, the first thing that we're supposed to do when we are saved is we're supposed to be obedient to God's word. And of course, we usually associate that with baptism. That's the first act of obedience. But we're supposed to be obedient. And this guy wasn't. It doesn't mean he wasn't saved, but it means that he failed in the obedience test. And it's a good example for us. You know, a great picture of the forgiveness of sin and healing. When someone lays down their pride and sees themselves in truth, that they're ugly, they're loathsome, they're an outcast, and that in no way can they heal themselves. And when they fall down and seek mercy and grace, it's then that God forgives and makes the person whole. And so I think the picture we have with this first miracle of leprosy gives us a lot of picture of sin and you know, what it does to us, and that we need the forgiveness of God to make ourselves whole. So anyway, that's the first one of the 9 miracles that we'll go over. Any questions?